All right. Well, for your
That's why it's
birthday,
wearing red.
we will have a special presentation
Test.
on poetry, biblical poetry. All right. Okay. Oops. Well, as we have been doing, we'll keep studying poetry. We're actually not in poetic analysis. Now we are down. Last week we've gotten to the step of significant words and went through the process for that. So I just wanted to do an example of that today, and then look towards resources and how we can use resources to help us in the study of poetic text. Okay, so let me just first remind ourselves of some of the key principles when we're doing word studies. We covered these last week, but I want to refresh your minds a little bit. The first is to remember words are to be studied from their original language. We're not looking at a translated word. We need to find the meaning of the word from the original language itself. And so that's important to keep in mind. So we're going to be looking at, and since we're doing an Old Testament book, we're going to be looking at the Hebrew word or words when we do our word study. All right. The second thing we want to remember is words display a range of meanings. So we have to remember that every word doesn't just have one meaning. There could be several to select from. And so we need to recognize that fact. And so then how do we figure out which meaning it is? How is the word being used in this particular verse? And that takes us to the most important principle of word studies, and that's words are defined primarily by their context. Okay, and so we understand what a particular word means as we get more words around it to give us an idea of the context of that word. Okay, I think I used an example last week of, we talked about the word trunk and all the different meanings. And then I gave the statement, my bike ran into a trunk. And it could be any of those meanings: an elephant's nose, the stem of a tree, the back of a car, some luggage. And then if I were to add more words, I ran into a trunk and its bark came off. Well, now we know specifically what I'm talking about. So this is the most important principle of word study, to understand a word is defined primarily by the context we find the word in. And so that's why word studies are coming late in the process, so that by this step, as again, we're into what, step 7? By this time, after we've done all of these steps, we are before it, hopefully we have a good understanding of the poem and a pretty good idea of the meaning of the poem and how it's broken up and the meaning of each stanza, so that when we pick these particular words, we should have a pretty good idea of what they mean, or at least when we see the meaning from a dictionary or lexicon, then it'll make more sense to us. So those are the 3 principles: study from their original language, recognize that words have a range of meaning. There can be several possible meanings of a particular word, but then we find the specific meaning by the context that word is used in. Now, last week, we discussed the process for doing word studies, and simply it's first identify the significant words that you want to study. The second's to then identify the lexical definition. That's the dictionary definition for the word in its original language. And then look at how this word is translated in other English translations. And also you could use your Cebuano translation just to see how the word is translated. And then the 4th step is to see how this word is used in other passages. And then finally, take all of that information and summarize the meaning of the word in a sentence or 2 in your own words, understanding it from the context. So we're going to do this with Psalm 99. We're going to go through and identify some key words, and then we'll pick a word to do a study on. I'm going to again ask a few of you to read. So we'll start with German, verses 1 through 3, and then Brother Ruel, verses 4 to 6, and Narelle, verses 7 through 9. All right? Okay, German, you can start us off. You're muted, brother. Still muted. Can you check your mute?
Muted ka, Brother German. Good.
There
The
we
Lord, okay?
All
Let
right,
the
good.
people tremble. He is enthroned above the cherubim. Let the earth shake. The Lord is great in Zion, and he is exalted above all the peoples. Let them praise your great and awesome name. Holy is he.
Okay, Ruel.
The strength of the king loves justice. You have established equity. You have executed justice and righteousness in Jacob. Exalt the Lord our God and worship at his footstool. Holy is he. Moses and Aaron were among his priests, and Samuel was among those who called on his name. They called upon the Lord, and he answered them.
Verse 7 to verse 9. He spoke to them in the pillar of cloud. They kept his testimonies and the statute that he gave them. O Lord our God, you answered them. You are a forgiving God to them, and yet an avenger of their evil deeds. Exalt the Lord our God and worship at his holy hill, for holy is the Lord our God.
All right, very good. Now, let's go through the steps for the word study process. And the first step is to identify the significant words in the passage. And the question is, well, how do we do that? How do we know what are the key words? Well, key one is look for words that are connected to the main theme of the poem. And as we think about Psalm 99, what word or words would that be? What's the main focus of this poem overall?
Holy.
The
Yeah.
holiness of God.
Holy. Definitely, we should look up that word. What does it mean, holy? And then what does it mean that God is holy? All right? So certainly we should look that word up. Okay, are there any other words connected to the theme of the poem or the focus of the poem that you can think of?
Exalt.
Yes, exalt. That's used in the main command, right? In verse 5 and verse 9. Holy is used in verse 3, 5, and 9. Any other key words connected to the main idea of the poem? In verses 5 and 9, not only are we told to exalt, worship. Yep, I think that's another key word. And then maybe even in verse 3, the word praise. We can see if it's the same word or not, but it's also a command that is given in response to the Lord. All right, as we look for key verbs, I would say exalt and worship and praise. Those are key verbs. Are there any other repeated words, perhaps, that stuck out to you that are not on our list so far that you noticed?
Justice.
Yeah, justice. And even maybe equity. We might want to look up the synonyms also for that to see if it's the same word or if it's in righteousness, right? Any other repeated words throughout the psalm that's come to mind here?
Reign, enthroned.
Yeah, maybe reign and enthroned in the first verses there. Okay, good. Now, are there any words that maybe were unclear or didn't make sense? Just words that any of you saw that you weren't sure what it meant?
About cherubim, Pastor Tim.
Yeah, maybe if you see that word cherubim and go, what is that? Or footstool. You know, I know what a literal footstool is, but what's he talking about there? Is that a literal footstool, or is that a reference to something else? Is it a metaphor? So that would be one that would stick out to me as maybe confusing. Any other words that?
So Tim, how about Holy Mountain?
Yeah, the holy hill. What's that in reference to? Okay. Okay, good. Words that are translated differently. And one that stuck out to me was strength. That word is translated, I think, if I remember correctly, as strength or might or mighty. Something like that in the different translations. So that's one that stuck out to me. Also, Avenger, I think, had some slightly different. Took vengeance was in one translation. Punished was in another. So what I'll often do is I'll get 4 or 5 or 6 English translations, and I'll just compare them, and I'll just look across and see if there are any words that so here, I'll just show you that. This is what I do. I cut and paste them. Where is it? Here we go. All right. I'm going to show this to you later, but at the very end of this document. Okay. You don't need to see all of these. I just want to show you what I do. I've got a table here. This is Psalm 99 from 6 different English translations. New American Standard, the NIV, ESV, the Net Bible, New King James, and the Revised Standard Version. And so what I'll do is just compare the words for, so for example, when I was talking about in verse, was it 4, the strength of the king. So this New American Standard said strength. The ESV, I think, said the king is mighty. The NIV said the king in his might. The Net Bible said the king is strong. And then we had strength in the New King James, and then the mighty king in the Revised Standard. So there's some difference there. So that's why it stuck out to me as a word that I might want to look up. Okay? So that's just an example. All right, so let's keep going with this. So as we look at our keywords, some other keywords might be words that are used in a figurative sense, or those that seem theologically significant. And I think we've already captured those with the word holy, for example, or worship. Okay, so that's the process of how you identify keywords. Words that are connected to the main theme of the psalm. Words that are repeated a lot. Words that just aren't clear. The key verbs, what key actions are being expressed within the psalm, exalt and worship, right? So that's how we do that. And then if there's just words that are translated differently that you notice. So for Psalm 99, we've already identified these. Holy, exalt, worship. Some of the other words were strength, footstool. I think we identified avenger and justice, equity, holy hill was mentioned. So these were some of the words we identified. And then the next step is we're going to select the word exalt. I just chose that one. That's one of the key commands of the psalm. And so I thought, let's just do a word study on exalt. So that's what we're going to do. So for the next step, it's find the definitions for the word in its original language. Okay? Well, how do we do that? Well, one online resource is Bible Hub. So we're going to try that again. I think I tried this last week. All right, so we'll just go, we could go to BibleHub.com. We could go to blueletterbible.org. We could go to Bible Study Tools. I'm going to use Bible Hub. I think it's the easiest to use. And let me see what happened to everybody here. Sorry, I lost some of you guys on my screen. I have to see all your beautiful faces. All right. So here I am. Can everyone see I'm on Bible Hub? Does everyone see that on the screen? Okay, good.
Yes.
All right. So what I did is I typed in the Psalm 99. And what you want to do next is go to interlinear. And I have this in your notes. I have each step listed out. So you can look there if you haven't done this before. But go to interlinear. If the computer will let you. And then what I do is I click here so I see the whole chapter. I don't know if you can see that hand. But I click the link for the chapter. Now I have the whole chapter. And it's the interlinear. So again, I have the Hebrew text in the middle here. Okay. And then above it, or below it, I have a literal definition from this website. Above it, I have this number. Who remembers what that number is?
Strong
It's the
concordance.
Strong's number. Strong's number is a good number to have as a reference point. Okay. So actually, I shouldn't have pressed that because I want to do a different word. So let me go back. So what we'll do is we'll go and find our word, exalt. It's used in verse 5. Here it is. All right. Exalt. And it comes from the word room. And so we're going to look up the Strong's number. The Strong's number is 7311. So I press that. And now here's the Hebrew word, room. Not like the place you stay in, but it's the word room. And now we've got all this information. Let's just look at a few things here. All right. Notice with me, there's a basic definition given by the Strong's number. The basic definition there is to be high, to be exalted, to rise. Now notice something here, guys. How many different ways this word is translated in the New American Standard? That's highly unusual. Do you see that? Let me expand that a little bit. Look at all the different ways it's translated. Typically, you don't see this. You might see 4 or 5 maybe. I don't know how many here actually. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. I mean, there's an incredible number of ways this word is translated. That tells you a couple of things. One is that this word exalt has a wide range of meaning, obviously, but also it tells you, boy, we really need to understand the context because of the wide range of meaning, right? You have words translated from display or lifted or stop or tall, present. I mean, these are very different ideas here. So this tells us this is a good word that we should be looking up because it has quite a wide range of usage. All right, so that's one thing we can identify. Another is Brown Driver Briggs. That's the lexicon or dictionary that BibleHub.com has. Brown Driver Briggs is one of the more well-known Hebrew dictionaries or lexicons. It's probably among the top 3 or 4 that have been written as far as usage and ones that commentators or scholars would identify as a good lexicon. So Brown Driver Briggs is what's used here, and you'll see various definitions that it has. Notice, number 1, be high. It's given as a definition. Number 2, be raised or uplifted. Another definition, be lifted, rise. Another definition, or these are usages now. Okay, so then this tells us some of the variations, basic variations in meaning. So you look through that and you can put together a list of the definitions. And then on the right, we see a bunch of verses. It is in these verses that the word is used. And notice here, in each verse, let's Exodus 29:7, the New American Standard translates this word as was offered. King James says heaved up. Okay? So what this tells you, though, is other verses that we can find the word in. All right, so those are all helpful pieces of information. So going back to our notes, we can, what I do is then put all of that information together. So here, using Bible Hub, and here's the steps, and this will be in your handout that I give you when I put the handout together for you guys, a summary of this session. You just go through these steps, and then from BibleHub.com, I gleaned, let's see, following information. All right, let me just do this. I'm going to cut and paste. Bear with me a minute. This is what I picked up from, let me expand it. All right, hopefully you guys can see that. Okay, so this is just, I compile the information from what I got from BibleHub.com. I've got the Hebrew word here, room. I've got the Strong's number, and then the basic Strong's definition. And then here, I took note of the different ways the word is translated in the New American Standard. All right? And again, that's just that list I showed you. And then finally, I put here the Brown Driver Briggs basic meanings. Okay? So that's how I use that, that website. Now, I also did this with blueletterbible.org, and I got a lot of similar information, but I also got a few extra statements. They have another lexicon called the Gesenius lexicon. It's an older one, and it came up with a few different definitions as well. To lift up oneself was a basic definition. To rise. Another one was to be exalted or to become high. And then another one's to be high, to be lofty. All right? And that's it. All right, we're not looking for a lot of deep things at this point. We're just trying to get a general idea of the different ways the word is used. Okay? Is everyone with me so far here? Are there any questions?
So then,
Yes.
can you is there any available offline resources that you could recommend that we can download, considering that our internet in the Philippines is not that stable?
And expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to have trouble finding anything that you can download if you don't have Bible software already. I mean, there's a couple, eSword might be a Bible software tool that you can get access to.
Lebronix.
Yeah, Logos, but it's expensive. If you can get that, these are Bible software.
By the way, I can install it in your computer, guys.
So there's some basic Logos that you can get, I think, at pretty low cost. Bible Arc has some things, but I don't think it has it doesn't have a full lexicon. That's something, let me look, see if I can find a downloadable lexicon. Now, as I said, Brown Driver Briggs is a good one, and you can get access to that through Blue Letter Bible, but I don't think you can download the whole thing, unfortunately. If you can get your hands on it, or if maybe the church has this in the best lexicon in a book form, theological word book of the Old Testament by Waltke, Harris, and Archer. This is the best one. It's the cheapest one as well, or among the cheaper ones. It's a 2-volume set, and I've used this even way before when I was in seminary. Because if in this what's really nice about this is if you find the Strong's number, it has in the index a Strong's number reference to the word. In fact, yeah, I'll actually show you something from this a little bit later. So if there's a way you can get your hands on this, I recommend this one. It's not online to download, unfortunately. Maybe we need to pray that that will happen someday, because it's very good. It's not really long. It's just 2 volumes. They're about this thick, and it's very readable. It looks at a word and the range of meanings. Very helpful. It's not just giving definitions. It actually will give you a discussion of how the word is used in the various ways. I'll show an example of it actually for this word we're studying. All right. But let me look that up, Brother Jesse, to see if there's something online like a lexicon you can download.
Pastor Tim, about Moises Selva, New International Dictionary of New Testament Theology and Exegesis.
That's from Van Gemeren. Yeah, New International Dictionary of Old Testament exegesis, right?
New Testament Theology and Exegesis, 2nd edition.
Oh, yeah, the New Testament is still, but we were looking at Old Testament.
Okay.
Does the New Testament, does that one have a downloadable?
Yes, PDF.
Okay, so that's called the New International, the New International Dictionary of New Testament. What's the full title?
New International Dictionary of New Testament Theology and Exegesis.
Okay. Silva.
That's a mouthful.
By Moises Selva.
Yeah, Silva. Yeah, that one I haven't used because for the New Testament I use one by Colin Brown. It's the same title, I think. The International Dictionary, New Testament Theology. It's very good.
Okay.
Very good. Problem is, it's not. It costs money. So, but let me check on this one at least so you can get some New Testament. There's another one, of course, you've probably heard of it, by Vine's Dictionary. That one you can get online, but it's not as thorough. It's okay. It's better than a lexicon because it does give some explanation, but it's limited.
It's limited.
Okay. So for our purpose, though, for now anyway, Bible Hub, Blue Letter Bible, you have some at least options to get some basic information. All right. Jesse says he has eSword that you can be installed that has some of these in there. Is Colin Brown in there, Jesse?
Yes, Pastor Tim.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. That's really good. NTWOT.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, those are the best in my opinion. They are the most readable, but they're technical enough. They give a lot of good information. What I really like about Colin Brown's is what he'll do, and this is New Testament Greek words, but he'll take a Greek word and he'll go back to the time it began. And so he'll tell what the meaning was when it was first used. And then and that could be ancient Greek, 600, 500 BC, 400 BC. And then he'll talk about how the word is used in the Septuagint. That's around 200 BC. Then he'll talk about how the word is used in the New Testament times. And so he sort of shows how the word changes and adds meaning over time. Really helpful. Very good. And so I recommend highly the one by Colin Brown and also the one by TWOT, the Theological Word Book of the Old Testament. Okay? And it sounds like Brother Jesse can help get your hands on that. All right. Well, let's keep going here. So we've identified a significant word, exalt. We've looked up the basic definitions of the word in original language. Now we want to, how is the word translated in other English translations? So that's simply just looking it up in these other translations. And it pretty much has a similar meaning here. I don't know if you can see. Most English translations translate it as exalt. All right? The idea of to honor, to give praise, reverence to. The Net Bible had praise. Interesting enough, they focus attention on just the idea of praise. The Revised Standard said extol, which carries the idea of praise as well. All right. So that doesn't really yield much helpful information. All right. Most translations translate it the same way. All right. Now the next step. This is what I wanted to show you. The TWOT. So for this word exalt, look at the information the Theological Word Book of the Old Testament gives us. And I just want to expose this to you if you haven't seen this. First of all, notice, okay, we have the basic word, room, and then the basic ideas, be high, lofty, rise up. And then notice it gives the different variations of the word. And now we see why the New American Standard has all these different ways that it translates the word. All right? Notice all of these different ways, different variations of this word. All right? Now, then the TWOT comes and tells us, notice here, we're not just given these basic short definitions. The TWOT will actually go in and explain things. So notice here, it says 3 broad groups of ideas are present in non-cultic, that means non-religious usages of room. Literal height, so the word can be used to mean talking of a high thing, or height as a symbol of positive notions such as glory and exaltation, or height as a symbol of negative notions such as arrogance and pride. Well, that's interesting. So basically the TWOT has looked at the various uses of the word, and it sort of brings it down to this basic idea. Either the word means to be literally high or made high, or the word has the idea of being high in the sense of being glorified or honored. Or a third idea is a person makes himself high in a symbolic way as showing he's haughty. You know, when we have an expression, you lift up your nose towards someone. That's an English expression that we use to express pride. Okay, so here the TWOT has summarized all the usages into sort of these 3 broad categories. That's really helpful. And then there's some more detailed information. I just picked up, it gives several examples, several passages of how the word is used. Negative idioms can be referred to someone who's haughty, the high ones. And then you'll get all this information on each of those words. So I really like this, the Theological Word Book of the Old Testament. And this just shows you some of the information that we still have there. Okay? So there's all the variations of the word and how it are used. Okay? And let's see, actually. Let's look and see if Psalm 99 is in here in this list. Sometimes you can find your verse. But there it is. Psalm 99, verse 5. Okay, here's a little bit technical. These are different Hebrew verb forms, express causative counterparts. God can make men high in rank, or men can exalt God in praising him. So that's how they view the word in Psalm 99, verse 5. Okay? All right, so I use this resource. If you can get your hands on it, it sounds like Brother Jess might be able to get your hands on it for you. I don't know if he's going to charge you a fee or not. You know, he's got his televangelist ministry that he's trying to keep going there. So, you know, you be careful. He might have a hidden pesos in there that he wants from you. But if you can get your hands on that resource, the TWOT, I think it's very good. So you can do your own study and then refer to the TWOT and see what other information it gives you. Will be really helpful. Okay? All right. Any questions up to this point?
Pastor Tim, the TWOT is in the Bible Hub.
No, unfortunately, no. Just Brown Driver Briggs, BDB.
BDB.
Yeah, so there's a difference. Let me explain this to you. Thanks for asking that question. You have Hebrew lexicons, okay? Those are just basically dictionaries. They give the like dictionary definition. All right, you know, the short sentences, short phrases. All right, then you have what are called
Briggs.
yeah, and so some examples of this would be Brown, Driver, Briggs, or Jacenius. That's the guy's name. I can't remember the full. I'm trying to think of the Old Testament ones. There's one called Halut, the Hebrew, Aramaic. Oh, what's this? Lexicon of the Old Testament. This is a very good one, or it's called Halut. Those would be dictionaries, basically. You know, like in English, you have Webster's dictionary, okay, where you just look it up and you're given basic definitions. That's really a lexicon. But then there are other books you use for word study that really look at the semantic range of meaning, okay? So these aren't dictionaries. They'll actually give you full explanations. Like we saw in TWOT, they'll talk about the various ways the word is used. They'll give passages as examples. They'll summarize the basic idea. And that would be, as we just said, the Theological Word Book, Old Testament, the New International Dictionary of Old Testament. I forgot the full name. Old Testament Theology and Exegesis. Okay, that's a big set. It's like 6 or 7 volumes, really thick. But Theological Word Book is like I said, a good one. But the difference is it doesn't just tell you, you know, the 5 or 6 definitions. It actually goes through and explains and discusses those definitions and how the word varies. So that's why they're really helpful. Okay? So there's 2 different kinds of books to use for word study. One is just a basic lexicon or dictionary. The other are these books that focus on the semantic range of meaning. And that's the one you want to get your hands on if you can. All right? So Theological Word Book of the Old Testament will be a great, great resource for you. Okay? All right, any other questions? All right, I hope that is helpful. Let's go to the next step. The 4th step is now identify how's the word that I've picked used in other passages. How's it used in other verses? Now here we have to be careful. This word exalt, in BibleHub.com, it said that the word exalt, or the word is room, right? The Hebrew word is used 199 times in 186 verses. So who wants to look up all 199 usages? Anybody want to? Okay, that's a little bit much. So how do we pare that down? How do we shorten that list so that we still get a variety of passages that will help us understand, but yet not too many, because then you'll be doing word study for the whole week, just looking up verses, and that won't be as helpful. Well, let me just explain to you this concept, circles of meaning. Okay? What we want to do is try to identify, you want to identify how the word's used in other passages closest to it. So by that I mean this. So for example, we want to identify the immediate context. In other words, is that word used within the same chapter or psalm? Do we find it used elsewhere in the same writing? Or is it used within the same book? Or is it used by the same author, maybe in another book? And then the next circle of meaning, is it used by other authors, and in this case in the Old Testament, or in the rest of the Bible? So for example, if we were to have a word in the psalm, the circle of meaning would be, we first ask, is this word used elsewhere in the same psalm? And then we would see it, and then we would ask, is the word used by the same author in another psalm? All right, because we want to first ask that question, because a person typically uses a word in the same way, right? That's just their common way. So if you look at the same author, he's going to likely use that word in the same way in other writings. And then the next circle would be, is the word used by another author in the Psalms? So in the same genre. And then we would look, is the word used by the same author outside of the Psalms? The author who wrote that psalm. Is the word used in other poetic passages outside of the Psalms? And then finally, is the word used elsewhere in the Old Testament? All right. Now, why am I going through this list? Well, what we want to do is start with the closest context. Is the word used elsewhere in my psalm? And then we go, okay, is that word used by the same author in another psalm? Again, a similar kind of writing. Or is the word used by someone else in another psalm? All right. So you see sort of how the different circles of meaning here. So as I look at Psalm 99 as our example, let's look at the psalm. Is the word used elsewhere in the psalm? Is exalt used anywhere else?
Yes.
Yes.
Which verses?
Verse 2
2.
Verse 2, 5, 9.
And 9.
and
Okay.
9.
And it's translated the same way in each of those verses, right? 99 verse 2, I think it says, he is exalted. And then verse 5 is the command, exalt. And verse 9 is the command, exalt. Now, all right. So it's translated the same way in the verse. Now, is the word used by the author in another psalm? Well, we first have to ask the question, who's the author? And remember, we can't know for certain, but if you remember back to when we discussed the setting of this psalm, we talked about 1 Chronicles 16. I don't know if you remember this discussion, because it was quite a while ago now, but we talked about the possible author of this psalm might be David for a couple of reasons. One is we noticed the reference to that he's enthroned above the cherubim, and also the reference to footstool, that these speak of the Ark of the Covenant. All right? And so that told us that the psalm was likely written either from the days of King David, and in 1 Chronicles 16, that's when the Ark was brought into Jerusalem to be put into the tabernacle. And so it could have been written as early as his reign, and all the way possibly, the latest it could have been written was just before the Babylonians came and destroyed the temple. All right, so that would give it a range of about 1000 to 586 BC. Okay? Now, when you compare 1 Chronicles 16, that's the passage that describes when the ark is being brought into the temple or the tabernacle. And David then recites this song that he tells Asaph to sing. And in that song, you see references, specific phrases that are also found in Psalm 96, Psalm 98, and Psalm 99. If you were to compare 1 Chronicles 16 to those three Psalms, you'd find a number of similar phrases. So what it appears is that these three Psalms in particular were likely written by David during that occasion or just after. as a call to exalt God as the ark, which represented his presence as the ark was being brought into the temple. So I think we could make a strong case for David likely being the author. We can't be certain, but I think he is a strong candidate. Okay, again, I don't know if you guys remember that whole discussion that we had a couple of months ago. All right, so now why I bring that up is because if David is the author, then what we should do is look for other psalms written by David where he uses this word. Okay, so that's what I did. I looked at, and David uses this word, I think, let's see if I wrote it down. I think he uses it 23 times in his Psalms. He uses this word room, okay? So you know what? That's plenty of usages. We don't need to go to look at all 199. Let's just look at how David used the word in the Psalms, all right? Now we're just going to pick these up real quick. I'm going to have you guys read them for me. We'll start with Brother Ramel. Pastor Ramel, can you read Psalm 9, verse 13, and then read Psalm 12:8? And then Brother Salito, I'll have you read the next two. I'll just keep scrolling them up. So
verses. Okay, Psalm 9. Be
Yes.
gracious to me, O Lord. See my affliction from those who hate me. You who lift me up from the gates of death. Psalm 12:8.
Before, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. How do you see this word used here? Okay, lift up is the word room. What does it seem like? How is it being used here?
It's been lifted up.
Yeah, obviously it's not a literal lifting up, right? It's not like he's floating.
Asking help.
He is be delivered, right?
Yeah, deliverance.
Delivered from death in this case. Okay. Okay. Now Psalm 12:8. Can you read that?
Okay. Yes. The wicked strut about on every side when vileness is exalted among the sons of men.
Okay, vileness is exalted. Well, obviously, vileness wouldn't be something that's being praised necessarily, or is it? What do you think the idea here is of exalted? It's that word room again.
Celebrated.
Yeah, maybe celebrated.
Vileness is promoted.
Promoted. Yeah, good. Made prominent, maybe. And even in a sense honored, right?
Yeah.
That the wicked, they honor vileness. Okay? Okay, Brother Salito, can you read Psalm 13 and then give us what seems to be how the word is used here?
Psalm 13, verse 2. How long shall I take counsel in my soul, having sorrow in my heart all the day? How long will my enemy be exalted over me?
Okay, so again, we see the word exalted here being used. And in what way do you think?
The same as 12:8.
Yeah.
How long will my
Promoted?
enemy, be prominent, maybe? I don't know. What do you guys think? Celebrated? Is that what you're saying? The idea is?
Yeah.
Celebrated. Shoot.
Maybe
Glorious.
protected.
Say again.
Protected.
Honored.
Have authority over or power over, something like that. Okay. It's this idea of position. Something like that. Okay. All right, now here's Psalm 18 is an interesting one. Again, this is a psalm written by David, and he uses the same word 3 different times in this psalm. Brother Salito, can you read this one?
Yeah. For you save afflicted people by haughty eyes, you abase. The Lord lives, and blessed be my rock, and exalted be the God of my salvation. He delivers me from my enemies. Surely you lift me above those who rise up against me. You rescue me from the violent man.
Okay, so here we have 3 usages, and they're all different. At least they're translated differently. You see that? It's the same exact word, room. But notice in verse 27, how is it being used? Let's just use the Hebrew. You save an afflicted people, but room eyes you abase.
Yeah.
So here this idea of proud, right? Arrogance. The translation here, haughty, right? That idea, remember, we saw from TWOT, this idea of a person who sort of raises himself up in a symbolic way, and it's an expression of pride.
Become proud.
Yeah, become proud. Okay? So that's how it's used. And then David uses it of God, but here of God, he's not saying God is proud or haughty, right? How's it used here of God? Right? Exalted be God. You know, it's this idea of honor, give reverence to. So it's this idea of lifting up in the sense of honoring a person. Okay? Lifting up in honor. And then notice verse 48. How's it being used here? You lift me above those who rise up against me. What's the idea here?
Deliverance.
Deliverance again. You know, it's kind of like when you rescue someone from drowning, right? You lift them up out of the water. Or if they're in the middle of being attacked and you take them out, you lift them out of that attack. That's this idea of deliverance that we see being used. All right, let's look at just a couple more examples. Pastor Jason, do you want to take these next 2? Psalm 21 and then Psalm 30.
Be exalted, O Lord, in your strength. We will sing and praise your power. I will extol you, O Lord, for you have lifted me up and have not let my enemies rejoice over me.
So in Psalm 21, how's the word room being used there? Speaking of the Lord, to be exalted. What would you say?
Made famous. To make famous. To make him famous.
Be exalted, O Lord.
To honor.
Yeah, honor. Reverence. Maybe. Give glory to. Right?
Yeah.
Made known.
Made known. Make known. In a honoring way, right? Okay, and then the next one you read is Psalm 30. You lifted me up and have not let my enemies rejoice over me. What's the idea here?
Deliverance.
Again, deliverance. David likes to use the word in that way. Okay? Let's see if there's any other. Okay, let's look at Psalm 145. We'll just do that one. Brother Kent, are you there? Can you read Psalm 145, verse 1?
Yes, I will extol you, my God, O King, and I will bless your name forever and ever.
So how the word
Um,
extol there is the
lifted high, or s-
Praise.
praise. Yeah, I think
uh,
the idea of praise is there.
praise.
Maybe maybe reverential praise,
Yes.
giving glory to. But notice here, again, using Hebrew parallelism, I will extol, I will bless. So it's the idea that synonym for bless, right? To speak highly of or well of. Okay? That's the idea. All right? Now, if we were to go through all,
Okay,
sorry, statement, question? So what I'm trying to show you in this exercise here is we take the verses used by the same author in other psalms. So that's going to be the most similar kind of genre, and we see how does this author use that word in other psalms. What's the range of meaning from this author? And so here again, I'm pretty sure the author is David. So we looked at how did David use these words. We could have looked at just how is this word used in any psalm, but I wanted to keep the number of verses short. And so as we look at it, generally speaking, as we see this word used, room, in the Psalms and how David uses it, when it's used of David, when he uses it of himself, he usually has the idea of being delivered. Okay? When he uses it of God, it's this idea of honoring and glorifying, giving reverence to, recognizing God as high and exalted, lifted up. And when it's used of others, it's used in reference as a person lifting themselves up in pride or arrogance. Okay, those are the three ways that David uses this word within the Psalms. And so as we go back to Psalm 99, which of these usages would we say he's using in Psalm 99? Psalm 99 is focused on God. How is he using this word there?
To honor and glorify.
Yeah, in the second way, right? And that makes sense. Okay? All right. So the last step then, here's where I put David's summary. The last step then is summarize the meaning of the word in the context of the passage in a sentence or two in your own words. And so how I summarized it was something like this. The word exalt is a good translation in the context of Psalm 99. It carries the idea of honor for God. Honor, I should have put to God, for he is on high. We don't lift or raise God up, but we recognize him as raised up. So again, the word has the root idea of being high. But we don't make God high, right? We don't lift him up. But in a sense, symbolically, we recognize he is lifted up. He is over
Amen.
us. Okay? And so
Amen.
we are called to do this in our hearts, to recognize him as high, as above, and to treat him with the reverence that position deserves. Okay, so can you see how the literal idea of being high or tall is applied in sort of a metaphorical way, a figurative way, to God, that he, because he is high over all of us, he should be treated with the reverence that position deserves. It's that idea. Okay? Now, what's really interesting about this word exalt is we have this word exalt where the root idea is, to be high or lofty. Okay? And notice in the command in verse 5, it says, exalt the Lord our God and Worship at his footstool. Okay, so we have these two commands: exalt, which again we just talked about, recognizing God as raised up and honoring him in that way. And then we have this word worship. Now, we won't do a full word study here on worship, but the root idea of worship is to bow down, to be low. That's the basic idea of the word behind the Hebrew word worship, for worship here. So that's an interesting idea, that we exalt, we recognize God as high, and how do we do that? By bowing ourselves, making ourselves low. Kind of an interesting contrast here. God is high, we need to be low in order to recognize God as high. You see that? And I think that would be, it's helpful to understand, do these word studies, because when you preach this text, you could kind of give people that same imagery and same idea that God is up, and how do we recognize him and glorify him as great and high? Is by making ourselves low. Physically, we could say by bowing down, but in our hearts, being humble and making ourselves low in recognizing him as high. All right? All right, how we doing? Questions, comments, cries of outrage, despair?
Pastor Tim, how can we know the psalm that connected to 1 Chronicles 16? How did you? There's a cross reference on that Psalm 99.
Yes. By looking at, knowing that this psalm, it's an enthronement psalm. It's similar to Psalms 93 through 98. And basically, yeah, as you look through the psalm, you'll see cross references. And as you study those cross references, maybe you'll know, oh, here's a reference to 1 Chronicles 16. Let me go look at that. And that's what I did. And as I looked at it, I read 1 Chronicles 16. I go, wow, there's a lot of similar thoughts or statements here that I see in these psalms. And so I did more comparison, and I said, it looked to me like these psalms are all written either in response to the events of 1 Chronicles 16, or maybe as part of those events. So yeah, I used a cross-reference for that. Now, sometimes you may not see that, but maybe a commentary will point that out. So you may not figure this out till later. And then again, the process of exegesis, we're always refining. So as we learn new things, sometimes we need to go back and refine previous steps. Okay? Any other questions? That was a good question. Okay. Let's look at the next step here. Consulting resources. Consulting resources. After we've done steps 1 through 7, we're now at a point where we can begin to invite other people into our study. Okay? Up to this point, I strongly recommend you do the study yourself. These are all things you can do on your own. All of these steps, okay? And at this point, in step 8, it's like, okay, well, let's see what other people have found. And maybe they found things that I didn't see, or maybe some of my thoughts, I can check someone else to see if they have the same idea or something different. Now, as we think about this, can someone tell me what kinds of resources can help with our exegetical study? When I talk about resources, what am I talking about here?
Commentary, Pastor Tim.
Certainly commentaries. Okay? Books that are specifically focused on a book of the Bible and give comment on each verse of the book. What else, though? Is it only commentaries? Are those the only resources we have?
Sermons.
Sermons. Yeah. What did somebody else do with this passage? What was their study? What else? How about study Bibles?
Okay.
Right? MacArthur Study Bible, for example. The ESV has a good study Bible. Okay.
Can we look for sermons first?
Sermons, I would, yeah, I mean, at this point, I would say wait, right, until you get to this step. All right? That's my recommendation. I'll talk about why in a minute.
Pastor Tim, what kind of commentaries?
For the
Devotional.
Psalms,
Yes.
for the Psalms, of course, the well-known one is the Treasury of David by Spurgeon. That you can get online. In fact, I'll give you a link to that in a little bit. Trying to think of other Tom Constable's notes on the Psalms, and I'll give you the link to that as well. Trying to think of online commentaries that are good. I can't think of any. The book forms, there's a commentary by Wilson, H. Wilson, that's really good. There's another one by E.W. Hengstenberg. All right, and it might be harder to find this one. This one is a German guy. He's actually a good commentator. Kyle. What's that?
Dr. Barik.
Yeah, that though he doesn't have commentaries. His are more like study notes. Okay, I would call them study notes. All right, and we'll actually look at his a little bit later if we have time this morning. Let me see if I wrote some other ones down that might be helpful. I tried to think of online resources, commentaries. Yeah. Jesse?
Bible knowledge commentary, Pastor Tim.
Yeah, that one's helpful. The Bible knowledge commentary. It's not as thorough. It's fairly short. It's by Walvard and Zuck. But that's a good 2-volume short commentary. All right, those are some. Say again?
Henry.
Matthew Henry. Yeah, I mean, he's an older one. Obviously, he's a Puritan from 1600s. He has a well-known set. I think you can get that online, right? He's got some helpful insights, but he's not as thorough either. And you know, I've used him sometimes. I would say the best ones, if you can get them, are these. You can get your hands on them. Bible knowledge commentary is good, but again, you won't get a lot of detail. But it's still a good resource. Let's look at some other. There's other ways though we can get information. You know, we have sermons, and probably I'd recommend Steve Lawson has some really helpful sermons on the Psalms, and you can look his up on YouTube or sermon audio. Okay, he's preached every psalm, I believe. And so that's a good resource to see how he takes the main themes and puts them in the sermon form. Study Bibles, study notes. Sometimes you can look up blogs, and Bible encyclopedias can have helpful information, especially on culture, on geography. It can be really helpful. Sometimes journal articles. If you just do a general internet search on the topic, you can find good information. Theology books. You know, if you look at like the Biblical Doctrines book. Okay. Oh, Charlie's noted. You can get Hengstenberg on eSword. Is that correct, Charlie? Yeah. Okay. That's a good resource. I really like him. Okay, I didn't realize that, so I'm gonna steal that link. Thank you. So if you look on the chat, guys, you can see a link. Maybe Charlie, can you send that link on the Facebook group message later? Okay, thank you. All right, so these are some different resources we can use. Now, I wanted to remind us here, why is this step so late in the process? It's step 8. What do you guys think? Why am I encouraging you to wait until you start looking at other resources? What might be some of the dangers of looking at these resources, looking at commentaries or listening to sermons early in the process?
It influences your mind and your God.
Yeah.
They are infallible. They are fallible also, Pastor Tim.
Yeah. They're
They're
fallible, so we have to be careful. You know, even John MacArthur doesn't get everything perfectly correct. Don't tell anybody I said that, but they'll take away my diploma. No, but and he would say that. He knows that he's not perfect either, even though he's very good. But they are fallible. So are we, by the way. What are some other reasons that we wait?
I think so that we will build our foundation solely written word and not on some process.
Yeah.
So that we
To
won't
really
skip the process.
say it again, John.
So that we won't skip the process.
Yeah. Why?
Then to.
Why is that? Why would skipping the process not be good?
A high probability that the output would not be good or maybe erroneous for that matter.
Yeah.
Plagiarism.
What's that?
Plagiarism.
So long as you credit where you got the source, that won't be plagiarism. So long as you won't acknowledge it or own it as yours.
But there is the temptation to plagiarize, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yes.
Amen.
Okay.
Influence your mind and your thoughts and your God.
Yeah, it will influence you, your ideas about the passage before you really think about it yourself. And so, and it could be, say there's a commentator that's like accurate and very good, and he actually explains the passage correctly. But if you haven't done the study, you're not really going to own it. It's not going to be embedded in your own heart. Remember, Paul tells Timothy to be diligent to show yourself approved. And in my mind, if I'm just reading what someone else says and then I just kind of copy him, even if he's accurate, am I being diligent? Am I being diligent? Am I being faithful? Yes, that guy, the commentator or the preacher that I'm listening to and using, he was faithful. Am I being faithful? Am I being diligent? You see, God's not going to, I don't think, going to say, okay, brother, Eric, you know what? Every one of your sermons in your life was perfectly accurate. But none of them were your sermons. They were this guy's. Okay, now I know, Brother Eric, that's not true. But copy-pasted. And God might then say, remember what I spoke through Paul to Timothy, that he would be diligent to show himself approved. Meaning, God wants us to be faithful in our own study, in our own diligence. Okay? It's perfectly fine to look at what other people have said. And in fact, I encourage that. That's why this step is in the process. We need to see what other men said, to check ourselves, to get ideas maybe that we hadn't thought of, or maybe there's something we really don't understand well, and we've studied it, but we still don't understand. Maybe somebody else has. But because of all the study we've done, we can read what someone else says and go, oh, you know what? That fits. That fits the context. That fits the the parallelism that I saw from this passage. Now it makes sense. But I think the main thing, men, is we are called to be diligent, to show ourselves
Amen.
approved. Okay? So it's
Amen.
not just, and let me say this in the right way. Please understand me. It's not just that we get the interpretation right. Now, we must do that. All right? That's a requirement. But it is also whether or not we are faithful in handling his word ourselves. Okay? Are we being diligent? Are you being diligent to show yourself approved? So when you stand before the Lord, you say, Lord, I prayed, I depended on you, and I gave it my best effort. I really tried to understand. I didn't have a lot of resources or tools. I just tried to understand from your word, and at times I was helped by others, and that's fine. So I'm not against using resources at all. I'm highly in favor of them. I use them all the time. But I think they need to be used at the right place and the right time and used properly. If we just start with another resource, we're really not going to think about the passage strongly ourselves. And again, if we pick a bad resource, how are we going to know it's bad?
Yeah.
Because most people, any guy that's writing a commentary, you realize that, right? The publisher has approved him to write a commentary. Publishers want to make money. Okay? So they're not going to just let anybody write a commentary. All right? If you call up, Zondervan and say, hey, I want to write a commentary on Psalms, they're going to go, who are you? Right? Because they want to sell books. So my point is, they're going to pick somebody who's intelligent. And I'm not saying we're not intelligent, but you know what I mean. They're going to pick somebody who they know is going to be able to sell books. And so that means that any commentary you pick up, the person is going to sound correct, usually. If you don't know the psalm at all and you just read somebody, they're going to have an explanation that's probably makes sense. All right? But that doesn't mean it's accurate. How are you going to know if it's accurate if you haven't given your own effort? Okay? So I think that in order so that we would not be tempted to be lazy, and so that we would also be able to interact with the commentator or the person preaching, so that we have studied the psalm enough on our own so that we know when something sounds right or it doesn't. We know when something is being explained within its context or it's not. Okay? Because we're already familiar with the psalm. Okay? Does that make sense, men?
Amen.
Yeah.
Again,
Amen.
I want you to use resources. I think they're very, very helpful. I mean, we already do. I know all of us do. But we need to use them in a way that will not compromise our own study and not compromise our need to be diligent and faithful ourselves before the Lord. Okay? And I think he'll bless that. Again, the Holy Spirit ultimately is the one who gives understanding, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Amen.
We will not understand it unless the Holy Spirit gives us that understanding. And he uses various ways to do that. But one of the primary ways, I think, is our own prayerful study. All right? And if you're diligent that way, I've met several men who have very few resources but really know the word because they've been diligent on their own. Okay? All right, so, and also too, men, personal study really provides opportunity for personal impact. Let me write that down. Personal study provides opportunity
To grow.
for personal impact.
And also to grow.
Yeah, to grow ourselves. So as you're digging in the Word, as you're spending time in the Word, as you're discovering on your own, I think there's a work the Spirit does in that, and that you begin to look at the passage and how it affects your own life. And I think it will be a much stronger impact on you if you're doing that study. Okay? Just like Ezra, he set his heart to study the law of the Lord, then practice, and then teach. And I think it was his effort, his study, that led directly to practice, because he began to apply it in his own life. And then he taught it to others. All right?
Right.
Any thoughts or questions on that, comments? Does that make sense?
So
Yeah.
Okay.
we are called to diligent study, not diligent copy.
Yeah. And as William said too, sometimes you'll come across things and someone will say it in a way like, oh, that's really good. It's perfectly fine to copy that if you give credit, you know, and just in your sermon, just do that. Just say, as we learned from Charles Spurgeon, he said this about this psalm, you know, just give credit.
I think that's the responsible and the ethical way to do everything, especially that pastoring and teaching are, of course, in the education industry. We are also professionals as well as spiritually guided.
Yeah, and I mean, we need to be careful that we don't make this a lecture, and so we're footnoting all the time. But you know, I think it's no problem to just say, you know, as Pastor so and so has said, or you know, the great preacher Charles Spurgeon once said. That's perfectly fine. Even borrowing outlines is fine, as long as you just say, you know. In fact, I was just listening to a guy not long ago, and he said, you know, I've been studying this. I think the sermon was on conflict. And he said, I've been studying this topic of conflict, and I read this book in my study, and I think I just borrowed the outline from him because he said it really well. So he just said up front to the congregation, I used this guy's outline. But he explained it in his own way, but he was up front, and everyone was okay with that. Nobody got upset, like, how come you're not using your own outline? You know, because he doesn't do it all the time. He just did it that one sermon. So if you're doing it all the time, that's a problem. But my point is that it's okay to borrow from others, you know, in a limited way, but just make sure that you let people know. That way too, it's, if you don't tell people, you know, and you borrow from others, not only are you, you know, sort of taking from someone else, but you're also misrepresenting yourself to your people. And if they find out, oh, you've been preaching, you know, using outlines from John MacArthur, and you're not telling us, that's sort of deceptive. So just be careful there. If you use somebody else's, you know, statement from them or outline from them, just let people know that's what you did. And I think most people are fine with that. Nobody will be upset by that, unless you do it every week. Then we have a problem. All right? Okay? But if you've done your own study, you know, most of what you say is going to come from you. All right? So that's another reason to stay focused yourself first, and don't use resources till toward the end. Was there a question somebody had, or a comment? I thought I heard. Okay. All right. Well, oh.
Pastor Tim, how many allowable when you preach a sermon, that how many quote that you give to your people?
Oh, that's a good question. You know, for me, I'll bet I quote or reference, you know, maybe 4 to 6 times in the sermon.
Okay, thank you.
As an average. Sometimes I haven't quoted at all. Other times I might quote more than that, but probably on average, somewhere around there. And usually my quotes, and this is important, if you do quote, don't make it a long quote. Okay? I just try to keep it to, less than 2 sentences.
To sentence. Okay.
Yeah. Because if you read a long quote, people, you can lose them and they may not grab the point. So if you have a long quote, what I would do is just summarize the idea and then just quote from one sentence maybe, and you can summarize the idea if it's like a whole paragraph. Just say, Pastor, the great preacher Charles Spurgeon once was describing this idea of exalting God and this picture of God being lifted up high. And Spurgeon says, and then you quote just one sentence. Okay? Something like that. Don't quote 4 or 5 sentences necessarily, because that might be, people won't be able to follow necessarily. You can once in a while, but.
Excuse me. In that perspective, can you also perhaps, or would it be okay perhaps to like refer where you got the source and paraphrase it so that it would summarize the main thought, and then just give them where you got it from, just like what you did. Great. Spurgeon said, let's do this, this, and this, taken from his sermon on whatever.
Yep. Yeah, I've done that a lot. I was listening to Pastor so-and-so the other day, and he told a story about, and then I just tell the story in my own words, but I got the story from this other guy. So I've done that. That's perfectly fine.
Pastor Team, I think always Dr. David Jeremiah, he doesn't quote the person, but it always appears on the screen.
Yeah, sometimes in your sermon, you may just say one pastor said, or quoting from a fellow preacher. And I like to give names just because I don't think you have to. I think you should have it in a footnote in your notes. All right. Mm-hmm. But I like to give names just to stay out of trouble. Even if it's a guy like, E.W. Hengstenberg, right? Nobody's heard of that guy in your congregation. But, I'll still say it. For one thing, I want people to start to hear some of these names. So maybe over time, Pastor quotes from this E.W. Hengstenberg all the time when he preaches from the Psalms. Maybe I should check this guy out. Maybe he's, so that's a way for people to learn maybe the good commentators or preachers.
To be curious of the name.
Yeah. Who is that guy? So what I might do, if it's a name that I know is people haven't heard of, I might say one Old Testament scholar named E.W. Hengstenberg said this. Or the Puritan, William Gurnall. He's one not many have heard of, but I'll say one Puritan whose name was William Gurnall described the spiritual armor like this. So it just exposes them to people as well. But you don't have to necessarily, but I have chosen to. Early on in my preaching, I didn't. And I think people thought I was not being honest, because I would say, one preacher said this, but some people thought I should say, so I just started doing it. I just to be safe, but you don't have to, as long as it's in your footnotes, in your notes.
Also, you sound smart.
Yeah, that's our goal, right? We want to look smart.
That you read a lot.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. We got a few more minutes. Let's see how far we can get. Now, how can we evaluate whether the resource should be used? Okay, there's a lot of resources out there, even a lot of online resources. That doesn't mean they're good ones. You have to especially be careful online. How do we evaluate? Well, one is look up something about the author. What are some things about the author we would want to know about? Look
Their
for
statement of faith.
Yeah. First, I'd even say before that, are they a Christian? You'd be surprised how many commentators
His
are
church
not.
denomination.
Yeah. What denomination? You know, that's going to help you know a little bit of their background. You know, oh, this guy's a covenant, you know, position, a Presbyterian, and that's okay. You know, I read from a lot of our Presbyterian brothers, but it's helpful to know that. So then that says, you know, he's going to have this theological perspective on certain issues. So it's helpful to know that. Statement of faith is kind of similar idea. What does this person believe? Do they believe in inerrancy? That's important to know. Do they believe in the deity of Christ? Do they hold to the doctrines of grace? Okay. So these are things you want to know. It doesn't mean you know, if the person is not a Christian, it doesn't mean you can't use him as a resource. It just means you better be careful and just know that if he's not a Christian, he's not going to be spirit driven in his analysis, but he may have helpful insights on a word meaning or a point of grammar or something like that. So
For example, Pastor Tim, do you know someone?
yeah, well, if we're talking about the Psalms, Klaus Westermann, what's another one I use that oh, what's his name? I'm drawing a blank. I don't know why I've drawn a blank.
Yes, Riguero.
Jess. Yeah, Jess. He has a good commentary on the Psalms, but I don't know where he really stands doctrinally. It'll come to me later. There's a couple guys that I use on the Psalms and you know, other commentaries as well. But you just treat them carefully.
How can they be so technical and full of knowledge at that and somehow miss it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. But, you know, there's also a number of Jewish commentators that I've used over the years that have been helpful, but they're, you know, not believers. We just need to know that up front, okay? So know something about the commentator. Again, don't trust everything an author says is biblically accurate, right? We talked about that. This is why personal study is helpful first, so you can be able to evaluate what another person has said. Don't just look at one resource either. You know, I've got my MacArthur Study Bible. I'm set. I don't need anything else. He's an inspired interpreter of the Bible. You know, MacArthur Study Bible is a great resource, but don't just use one resource. You know, try to use as many as you can in the time that you have. All right? Because if you see four guys and they all say the same thing about a verse and it's different than you, maybe those four guys got it right and you got it wrong. Okay?
That has the highest probability.
Yeah, exactly. Also, too, view the commentary or the sermon or the resource as a tool that helps you, but not one that gives you your full manuscript. All right? We've already talked about that a little bit. All right? We don't copyright, you know. And then here's a key one, men. Look for resources as you read it, the resource, that give a clear explanation from the text as to how they interpreted it. I've read a number of resources, and they'll talk about church history. They'll talk about, you know, these other interpreters, but they don't really talk about the passage or show you from the passage in its context how they got that meaning. So look for that. All right, and when you listen to sermons, right, is the guy telling me, explaining the text here, or is he just throwing in his own theological ideas? All right, so this one's important. Use those resources that show you from the passage their interpretation. All right, that might seem obvious, but it's you'd be surprised how often that doesn't happen. All right. Okay, and then I'll give you. I have these all. Here's a bunch of online resources. It'll be in your notes, so you don't need to worry about copying them here. I have a number of online, and one I found recently, a very good one. I found online access to Irving Jensen's notes. Now, Irving Jensen did an overview of every book of the Bible, where he gets into the background of the book. It's really good, really helpful. So you can get that resource and download it for free. He's got an Old Testament and a New Testament one. So keep that in mind. And then for the Psalms, I already mentioned some of these, but here's the link to Spurgeon's Treasury of David. All right, let me just show this to you. This is a great resource, Treasury of David by Spurgeon. Let me pull it up here. All right.
10.
All right. Treasury of David by Spurgeon. Look, it's got every psalm here. So you can pull it up. And what's great about this is I'm pulling up Psalm 99, is he's got his own notes for each verse. You know, and then after that, so he gives you his commentary for each verse. And then after that, he gives several other commentators. Here's several notes from other commentators. Now, these are going to be guys, you know, before the 19th century, but that's okay. At least you can get, so the Treasury of David is not just one commentator, it's actually a bunch of them. All right? So here's comments from other men on verse 1 on different phrases. Okay? All right, so this is a really helpful resource for the Psalms. Highly recommend it. And again, I gave you the link. It'll be in a handout, the handout that I send you guys. Okay? Look at all this free stuff you guys are getting. Wow, this is amazing, right? Aren't you glad you came this morning? Okay. All right. Oh, and then I already talked about this resource before, but I would say it's one of the better ones as well. Dr. Barrick's study notes. Okay? And let's see if let's see if we have time. We'll do this next. We'll pick up on this next time we meet. What I'm going to do next time we get together is I'll take one resource. I'll show you how I use it, and then I'll show you how I incorporate it into my notes. All right. So you'll see my exegetical study. I put everything in a Word document, all that I study. So I'll show that to you next time. And then how you can use these resources. I'll use one from Dr. Barrick as an example of just the process I go through. But basically what I do is this. I take the resource. So let's say it's a commentary on Psalm 99 from Spurgeon, for example. Okay? So I take that resource, and then I'll read through the whole resource, and I'll just highlight different things as I go through it. Okay? Because I've already studied this psalm thoroughly. So I'm pretty familiar with the whole psalm. So I just go through the resource and I'll highlight or I'll circle or whatever, cut and paste, things that I find helpful from the resource. And then I take those things that I highlighted and I incorporate that into an exegetical document. All right? So I'll show that to you next time we get together. All right. And with that, I need to let you know next week actually is my elder meeting again. So I'm not going to be able to hold our workshop next Thursday. So if we could, we'll postpone until the following Thursday, which will be July 10th. Okay. So July 3rd, we won't be able to have class due to a commitment I have at our church, but July 10th, we'll pick back up.
So that's a Thursday, not a Friday.
Oh, I'm sorry, July 11th. I'm thinking, for me, it's Thursday. For you, it's Friday.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yes, that's
July
right.
11th.
Okay.
Well, is that a Friday or Saturday? July 11th.
Yeah,
It's Saturday. 10
Okay.
is
July 10 is Friday, right?
Yeah, July 10 is Friday.
Yeah, okay. William, you're trying to trick me. Okay. So July 10th will be our next meeting, and hopefully at that time we'll go through our resources, and then we'll look at the what, why, how. So Lord willing, at our next meeting, we'll finish up the exegetical process so that we can begin to focus our attention on the sermon preparation. And how do we take all of this and move towards the sermon? All right. Now, I know I promised you, or I said, we try to cover all this in 10 weeks, but obviously this is our 10th session and we're not done. So I appreciate your patience. I'm really just, we'll see how long this takes, but hopefully you can stay with this, and we'll see how much longer we need to go, and then we can start getting you back on your assignments, and I'll start working on grading those assignments so we can get you ready for, Lord willing, we'll see how things are, but I'm hoping that in October we'll be able to meet face to face. We'll see what happens. Only the Lord knows if we can do that, but we'll keep working through the process here and finish up, maybe hopefully in a month or so. We'll see how it goes, and then we'll go from there. Okay. So that's the plan, Lord willing. Man, makes his plans, but the Lord directs his steps, right? So we'll see what he decides. Okay, so hopefully that helped you a little bit. And any final questions, any final comments before we break for lunch?
thank you again, Pastor Tim, for putting up this effort. This is very helpful. This is very beneficial.
Amen. Thank you very much, Pastor Tim.
Okay, great. I'm glad.
Thank you, Pastor Tim.
Glad. Thank you.
Bye-bye,
And men,
Pastor Tim.
we'll see you soon. Men, if you have anything that we can do that would be helpful or could improve our times, please, you are more than welcome to let me know. Just message me and tell me if there's something you'd like to do or to see, or if there's a way I can better, bring this together and teach. I'm very open to that. Okay, this is the first time I've been using Zoom, so I haven't done this before we've started this together, so I know I have a lot to learn in this. So if you have any other ideas or thoughts to make this better, I welcome them. Okay.
Yes, Pastor Tim.
Okay.
All right. Let's ask our brother Emmanuel if he could close us in prayer.